Well, listen, I have conversations from startup to, just about enterprise, but like mid-market as well too. And it really just depends on where they're at and building out their brand. My thought is that honestly, people start thinking about marketing a little too late in the game. And anyone that's going to be listening to this that has talked to me, I feel like this is on repeat. I think especially from a startup perspective, you're so focused on like the bottom line, getting things up and off the grounds that you forget to market yourself. And that's a huge part of it. And this is also where I think like it's not just influencers, it's creators, it's podcasters, it's journalists. Those all fall into the creator space when I'm talking about building out a community. So it's not just like the social media influencers. Um, those people are the ones that make up your community that will eventually be the evangelists for far beyond what you do from like a paid perspective, like a paid media perspective.
Yeah, and so I mean, you can have the influencers be evangelists, but you can also have the actual community or your customers become evangelists as well, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a big believer that when it comes to finding influencers and creators, you have to look. I think of these like concentric. I think I'm saying that right. Concentric circles where you have to look what's closest to you first, right? And what's closest to you is not even just your customers, right? It's your family and your friends and your investors as well. If you are a startup, right? Take a look at who are the people that really are getting behind your brand and make them also your evangelists. Like, and the road to being an evangelist is it's longer than just like, hey, you like me, post something, say something, right? Yeah, if it was that simple, everybody would do it and they'd be doing it well, but that's just not what it is. But like when you look at it from these from this concentric circle perspective, like that next layer are your customers. And the reason that you reach out to them first to help build out your community is because they already know you. They know you, they have experience with your brand, they've experience with customer service, with the sales perspective, so they can really give an authentic perspective to their community or their audiences. I kind of use community and audience when it comes to like influencers a little synonymously as well, because essentially you're working with two different communities. You're building your own, but you're also building your own to speak to an influencer and a creator's community and audience of followers.
And when you're building a community, like if I understand correctly, you're really focusing on the lifestyle or the thing that people are wanting to support or achieve and not as much about your product, or am I incorrect there?
I think yes. Short answer, yes. You're not focused on, I'm coming from software, so this is why I say this. You're not coming from book a demo, let me show you how it works, right? Obviously, if you're a D2C company, you're focused on something different, right? But like the community aspect is more about building a shared space for the connection that you have. So if you think about like your customers, right? What they have in common is you. So give them a space to speak openly and freely about you, right? If you're a software, give them a space where they can speak openly about the problem that you're solving or the challenge that you're trying to tackle by leveraging your software. If you are a product, give them a place to like speak about how they can leverage, the product, right? Like, and it really depends on what you're really trying to achieve. If what your goal is out of your community to create word of mouth marketing, because that's essentially what you're doing by establishing a community. If you're trying to do that, give them the space to do that, and then give them a reason to keep coming back. Like that's also the part. It's not enough to just create the space for them to gather. Give them a reason to gather, right? Like, and it's more than just giving them a prompt or a poll to engage with. Provide true value for them to keep coming back.
And I imagine, so, we're talking people get started at the beginning, they're figuring out how to build a community. To me, the community is technically goal one. Goal two, or the final goal, would be turning that community into a cultural movement. I mean, you think like Harley Davidson and Apple, to where like people are either Apple or they're Android, or, and I imagine your product development starts to go into that, and that's part of your marketing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I think it, the brand building comes naturally. So it's not even something that you have to think about. When you build a tight knit community of influencers, creators, customers, whatever it is that you want to call it, that the brand follows with that, right? If you're continuously creating value for them, there's not a reason that they're not going to talk about you. Harley Davidson is a really great example. Another really great example who really knocks it out of the park is Gymshark, right? Like the sales come when you create that community out of what you're trying to build, right? I like to think of community as the personification of your brand. That's really what branding is anyways. It is that personification of who it is that you are. These community members are not only evangelizing, but they're sharing what your values are, and they're talking about your values, not just your product. And in this day and age, we're also craving so much connection as well. And I don't know if it's even more so like post-COVID, but I think we're human beings, and essentially that's what we value. We value genuine connection, and they're really great storytellers.
Yeah, and I imagine it's not super black and white in the sense of, building a community is a step-by-step process, the same for every product type or company. Um, but with that, I mean, what are some of the core foundations to actually starting to build a community, and like where is it housed at? Because when you think of community, sometimes it could be like a Facebook group or a Slack channel, or but what does that really look like?
Well, you're probably not going to like this answer because it's not straightforward. It really does depend on who you are and how your customers really engage best. So, for example, if I'm trying to create or put together or develop a community for creators and influencers, now, driving them online is probably not the best place because they're on their phone. So I'm going to think of like, what's an app that I can create? What's a community app, right? There's some really great ones out there. Slack is really great. Geneva, I think you can even do like WhatsApp as well. So there are a lot of places that you can create it. You have to think about where your customers are at. Where do you want to develop the community, and think of them. And that's how you built it out versus thinking, what's easiest for me? I am the one that's on Slack all of the time. So it would be so much easier for me to be on Slack, because if you don't make it easy for them to engage and consume like the value that you're creating for them, that there's no point in creating it. Like it has to be easy for them too. They may like you, but you also have to make it very easy for them.
Yeah. Do you ever find businesses have to go back to the drawing board with that? So, like, instead of saying, hey, maybe community's not for us, like maybe we chose the wrong path or place for community?
I think that there's some course corrections. I haven't seen a ton of them, but I also think that one of the things that people, I shouldn't say people, and this is such a generalization, but I don't know the brands are thinking that hard about how am I really going to be strategic with the community that I build. Like I said, there are brands that are doing it and that are doing such a great job. Like, you named a few. I said Gymshark as well. I think you have to be open to going back to the drawing board. If something isn't working, then you kind of have to evaluate everything. It may not just be where you're driving people to. Maybe there's not enough gamification. Maybe there's not enough value that you're providing, right? Like if you're providing enough value, people will come to you. So you want to make it easy for them, but also like the platform or what you use to like kind of house that community isn't always like changing it isn't always the answer, because that's the thing too. Like you have to create a new habit for people if you do that. So I think there's a lot of foundational things that you need to establish before you create the community, and that will help you decide what's the best place for me to house them. And I think the biggest piece of advice that I can give anybody that's thinking about kind of creating a community but isn't quite sure is do the lowest lift first, right? There are a lot of There are a lot of platforms that integrate with like the bigger community building platforms. Maybe it is Slack. Maybe you want to try it on WhatsApp. Maybe you want to create a private Instagram group first. And then let's see how people are engaging with that. And then also continuously ask your community, what do you like? What do you not like? What do you want to see more of? I mean, the more people that you have in there, the more that they can inform how to make the community even more engaging and better for you.
Very true. Do you ever see people going multi-channel? When you said private Instagram group, I was thinking, I didn't realize that existed, but I guess I've seen that. But do you see people trying like Instagram and Facebook or does that just get too
Oh
messy?
yeah. No, I've seen, I'm part of some groups that are on Slack, on Facebook, on like multiple areas. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think that you come out the gate being in 7 different places though. I think that's something that you develop into. And part of that reason is because if you think about it, when you reach a point where your community is so diverse, everyone engages differently. I've had so many conversations about Facebook groups. Facebook is not dead. And I know that I am Gen X and I'm in the beginning world. Like I still remember MySpace. Like that's where I'm at. So Facebook groups are not dead. And I see like even millennials engaging in that, right? Like it's not, there's something that Facebook has got going really well with Facebook groups. And I think it's this great combination of it's familiar, it integrates with things that we already have, right? Um, but I guess my point is like, don't go out the gate being all of the things and being everywhere. Just identify what is working well and then start adding things on. If people are like, I really wish that there was a quicker way for me to respond, maybe Slack is the answer, but maybe, Facebook chat is also the answer. Maybe it's LinkedIn. Like it really does depend on your audience. But I'd say like start small. And if you have no idea what platform to start with some place that people are familiar with. This is also why Facebook groups are really great. People are familiar with it. So Instagram is some place that people are really familiar with. Like go where people are familiar with, and it's not going to be a heavy lift for them to start engaging with you, and then grow it out from there. Or you can go in and if you already have a community group, migrate them to something that's bigger and better.
Will we ever, and I run an agency and we run Facebook ads, will we ever start saying meta?
Uh, yes. I don't know that I will ever start saying meta, but I don't know what it is about that. Yeah, I get it. It's ingrained in me that it's Facebook. I should say
Yeah,
meta.
it will always be Facebook. And I know you keep saying providing value or providing, resources and things like that. In the B2B world, I mean, I see that all the time with groups for marketers and stuff. They're providing, tools and guides and stuff. But if we're looking D2C or e-commerce, what does that generally look like? Like, how could someone adapt that into their business?
The best answer to that is to make a list of all of the questions that you get. Think of start with an FAQ, meaning like what are all of the questions that you're getting, and then what are the answers to it? In the answers that you're providing, is there a tool, a conversation that can be fostered to go a level deeper than just answering the question? And if so, that's the value that you're creating for your community. So for example, if I am an e-commerce brand and let's say it's sunglasses, right? That's what we're going to go with today. Today, that's going to be my example. As a sunglass brand, they've got all sorts of sunglasses, right? And I want to create a community out of, a fashion item such as that, right? Like, what kind of questions are you getting about those particular sunglasses? Is it, and I have no idea what questions that you would be getting, but maybe it is the size. Maybe it is like, do they break easily? Like, how to take care of your sunglasses, right? Maybe those are all of like the frequently asked questions that you get. So I would take a look at those questions and be like, all right, let's say one of the common questions is, I'm at the beach and I always get like water on my sunglasses and I hate those dry spots. How can I take care of it? What should I put in my purse? What should I keep in my bag? What should I keep in my bag if I'm a man? What should I keep in my bag if I'm a woman, right? Like, I think that there are all sorts of ways to chop it up. And maybe that's a blog post, but maybe that's a social feed as well, too. And maybe that's just a conversation that like you're creating in that particular group where you're like, what's your solve? What's your solve? What's your solve? And all of a sudden you have top 10 tips for taking your sunglasses to the beach and keeping them clean. That's a very elementary example, but like that's how I attack, like, how can I create value? And that is whether you're B2B, D2C, whether you're e-commerce, like all of that stuff. Look at the questions that you're getting. What are those answers? And can you create something from those answers?
Yeah, and one thing I've seen in the D2C space in terms of creative strategy that people are talking about is looking in 2023 at launching a podcast for your business and focusing on, finding a bigger topic. So I guess my question will keep in this sunglass brand. Does the brand have a name? We'll call it
Sunshine.
Sunshine.
Sunshine
Okay.
Shades.
Sunshine Shades. Okay.
Sunshine
So
Shades. Yeah.
with Sunshine Shades, that's hard to say. Um,
I know. Well, I created a tongue twister as well too.
yeah. Sunshine Shades. With that, as you're putting out content, would it be good to expand to fashion, or would you stay within your specific little lane or niche? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yes, I know exactly what you mean. And I love that question because I think my biggest advice is expand. That's how you're going to create more value. So if I'm starting off with sunglasses, what are now my tips? And continuing on that example, what are my tips now for going to the beach in general? And like that opens up a whole other can of worms, right? Like it opens up like I don't know if you've seen, and I don't think this is made up, but I've seen it on TikTok for sure. But there are these people that set up like your beach setup for you, where you call them up and they set up the umbrella and the towel and they have it all set up and then they pack it for you and they they bring it back. That's a phenomenal like idea in general, but like bring that to your community. Did you know these are all of the other things that you can do, right? Like that's how you create even more value. You have to, the thing that they have in common are the sunglasses, but what other things come with that? Because people aren't walking around naked with just sunglasses on, right? You can dive into the fashion space. How many sunglasses should I have? Like, where are you getting yours from, right? Like, well, I guess not where you're getting yours from because my brand is Sunshine Shades and I should have all of the sunglasses. But like, what are the cases? Like, yeah, I think there is an opportunity that is missed if you're not expanding from that and you're bringing everything else that they use with your product or service along with that as well.
And do you see people, and I know I'm just rapid fire questioning here, but all these, thoughts are coming up as you say these things. Do you see people expanding into partnerships by doing that type of thing?
Oh, absolutely. I think this is also what the creator economy space has really developed is all of a sudden there are these content collaborations or partnerships with other brands, which I think it makes it so communal what it is that we're doing. And I think like when we can let our guard down and see there's a space for really everybody, which is probably a little altruistic if I'm being honest, but I like to think that we live in this world where people can see how can we partner together, right? Using the sunglasses space. Maybe there is a really great, like, I don't know, Aloha brand is a really great example of it, right? Like maybe there's a way to collaborate there and maybe there's Tommy Bahamas on top of it as well too. Is there a potential partnership where we're all working together and like we're kind of known together as well too? So I think like I do believe that like the creator economy, world has opened that up for everybody.
Yeah, and I see a lot of talk about creator brands becoming big, or at least creator partnerships, like you're saying as well. So you mean like with Sunshine Shades, you would have, a specific creator have their own line of glasses, or?
Oh, yeah. I see partnering with other brands and partnering with creators as well, too. I see that a lot with like a lot of the influencers that I'm following. I love fashion and I love when they are collaborating with other creators as well and they come up with their own line. And it is very limited edition. I think it's a great marketing strategy as well, too, because it really the scarcity mentality comes into play. Oh, I want to get this. I follow this creator. I love her jewelry or her wardrobe or the get ready with me, right? Like I love this. I have to have this. And those things tend to sell out. Like but it's also about finding the right creator partners for something like that, that not only do it well, but represent your brand really well too. It's not about like the follower count. And yeah, they do great videos and you're going to get a lot of impressions, but really where true like connection with your brand works well is if they are going to be good stewards of your brand, if they're going to be great storytellers. Essentially, if they could be synonymous with your brand and vice versa.
Well, and let's talk about that a little bit because on the other side of the road, it could feel really transactional. They're just posting like, use my 10% off code in the, checkout and all that stuff. So how do you navigate those roads?
How do you navigate
Just
being
making it feel
transactional?
authentic. Yeah, just making it feel authentic. So like it's a partnership that actually doesn't look like a paid promotion, essentially.
I think it's a matter of relationships and aligning yourself with the right creator. So one of I think one of the myths I strive to debunk is that it's not a numbers game, as in like you need 1,000 people, saying your brand. Yeah, I mean, I think that there is definitely a time and place for that. So I do think it's more about being strategic of when you use transactional relationships and when you're developing longer term relationships. I think essentially what you have to do is align yourself with someone who truly loves your brand. And that's why, like, even looking at family, friends, employees, and customers first is going to get you better aligned with that. And it's not always about the follower count. It tends to be like the world of like micro influencers are really successful because they're not huge yet, right? They're not macro, they're not celebrity influencers, but man, they can really tell you what they're obsessed with. You want people to be obsessed with your brand, right? And if you're creating a good product, you're going to find people that are going to want to talk about it. Like that's essentially what it is that you're looking for. So, trying to bridge the authenticity gap means that you have to be selective and it's going to take time. And you have to go into it with a little bit of patience, knowing that it's worth your while. What's taking long in finding that or discovering that right creator for your brand will pay in dividends down the line. You're not going to need as many creators, right? Or maybe you do, but like that partnership that you're creating with the right influencer can foster so much more. All of a sudden they're going to have referrals as well too. Like, oh my gosh, my friend would love this, or my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother. Like it expands from there. And also you end up getting more from those genuine connections with creators because they tend to go above and beyond. Like they're a business, you got to treat them respectfully and vice versa. And I think like when you can establish those long-term partnerships, those long-term relationships, that's where authenticity sits.
Well, and what about going a step further? And I've seen this in the agency world, not necessarily in this situation. So I guess it's more so a question, but I see agencies when they're looking at, sourcing UGC or sourcing creators, getting to a point to where it makes sense for them to bring someone in-house to be a full-time creator to then make content for their clients. Do you see brands ever doing that on this landscape of having like a full-time creator? They're not necessarily an influencer with 100K followers, but they're creating, organic looking content for the audience.
Yeah, I see it all the time. I think when it comes to implementing influencer marketing as a strategy, you as a brand, regardless of B2B, D2C, all that stuff, you have to establish what it is that you want to get out of that. And influencers and creators are really great for, brand awareness, for building out community, for driving revenue. You're always going to get that. How much you get, that really depends on like the levers you pull and the knobs that you twist. But you can also have just content creators that are there for like creating content for you. And then what it is that you do with that content is really how you maximize your efforts when it comes to influencer marketing.
Yeah, and that's where you go into trying to measure it. And I say trying because I imagine there's a bit of a dark social or just kind of gray area when it comes to metrics with this type of movement.
Absolutely. I think when it comes down to it, what you end up seeing in the long term is the halo effect of leveraging influencers, right? You're gaining the brand awareness, you're gaining more direct traffic if you're looking for like a number or like a metric or a KPI. Like take a look at your Google Analytics. What are people searching for? Are they searching for the things that your creators are talking about? Then it's working, right? Or do you have a lot more direct traffic to your website? Then it's working. If you've got more branded hashtags unsolicited, then it's working, right? But I think as a marketer, one of the things that we struggle with is we're always chasing attribution. And I don't know how to overcome that. Like maybe that's my life goal, is figuring out how we can create value from that. Because like when we, I mean, look out world, when we can actually do the one-to-one attribution, that's where like marketing really wins.
Yeah. Yeah. I think ultimately what I'm hearing is it just takes buy-in from the leadership or the owner from day one of just, this is the direction we need to go in.
Absolutely. The buy-in will make everyone's life easier, because I think the difference is when you don't have that buy-in, then the person that's implementing the strategy is, spending their time on the admin side of like, let me prove that it's working. We all want to prove that it's working, but when you're, I don't know, burning calories in an area where you're like consistently trying to put together decks or are always in a meeting trying to like, there's always going to be a level of that. You can't take that out of it. But when you're spending more time trying to prove it to your boss, that's wasted time when you can be developing like relationships. So it really does take buy-in from the top down to really execute it well. And that's, I mean, time and time again, I've talked to so many brands that when you have like that executive leadership buy-in to it, those are the really successful brands that are leveraging influencers as a strategy.
Yeah, because they understand that branding is the key to long-term, hyper growth versus just being sales focused from day one, new customer acquisition. And oftentimes those companies lack LTV focus as well. So
Yeah. Well, and I like to think of influencers. I mean, like, I like to think of influencers from an SEO perspective. Like in marketing, you're never going to stop looking at SEO, but the efforts that you put forward from an SEO perspective, you do not see after a week of doing that. You don't change your H1 and then all of a sudden see like, your traffic skyrocket. I mean, every once in a while, I'm sure that there is a moment. Anyone listening to this will probably want to give me an example of it, but like in general, you're never going to see that huge spike. So influencer marketing is essentially the same thing. It's the people version of SEO, right? Like you have to put in the time to see the longer term goals. And there are people that go into influencer marketing, not people, there are brands that go into influencer marketing assuming that they just need to find the right creator and they're going to go viral. Now I'm tongue-tied. They are chasing virality versus brand building.
yeah, because I could say that could be seen a lot with just using influencers for paid social content as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting. Okay. And, outside of that, like that sounds like a bottleneck, but what are some common bottlenecks that you see happen that cause people to fail or just get completely off course with building a community?
With building a community, I think, buy-in from the top is key. Setting expectations from the get-go is going to be key. That can prevent some bottleneck. It's really setting the expectations. It's being strategic with your plan so that you don't encounter bottleneck, because there's nothing worse than launching something and then being like, all right, now what? You kind of want to have your KPIs set up before you launch everything so that you can start measuring what it is that you're doing to make strategic plays. So I think it's really understanding like the foundation that you have to be able to set at the beginning. It's when you're building a house, it's the wiring and the electricity and the plumbing, right? You have to set the electricity and the plumbing for the lights to turn on once you put up those walls. So it's really, that's where I see a lot of bottleneck, is when you're either not allowed the space or you're trying to implement something a little too quickly. We want to be, as a company, as brands, we want to be able to be nimble. We want to see that community grow. We want it there now. Like, let's do it. But you also have to be very realistic. You're dealing with people when it comes to community, and it takes time to build trust. I mean, who do you trust right away?
Yeah. Yeah, true.
That's the truth of the matter is you don't trust people right away, and you have to be able to build that, and you have to be consistent. But consistency takes time, and these are things that you can't change.
That's true. And when you say setting those expectations up front, are we speaking specifically linear? Like, I'm going to tell my boss, let's look for at least 6 months, or, you tell me, like, what does that specifically look like?
I think setting expectations is building the strategy out so that the expectations are set. I also think it is linear. There's certain things that are linear, and building out the strategy is part of that. So, like, for example, if I'm starting day one from scratch, I have no, platform that I'm looking. I don't even know what. I just know that by the end of 2023, we want to have a community that has X number of people. Like, you have to be able to set those types of goals. Like, setting the expectations is really mapping out, what does that look like? What's the road to get to 500, let's say? What is this road to get to 500? And you kind of need that strategy so that you can be nimble for the non-linear moments in your community. Because after 60 days of engaging with something, you're going to see what people like, what people are attending, what they're engaging with. And you want to constantly reiterate, what can we do better the next time, right? So you want to create a strategy that's the linear expectations, just so that you can manage the nonlinear moments of building out your community.
And it turns into a bit of a compound effect. Plug for one of my favorite books from Darren Hardy, but compound effect, and it kind of builds over time that way. So we normally close these out with 3 rapid fire questions. So I've already been throwing them at you, but we're going to speed up with these last 3 here.
Goodness, I love it. I'm not prepared for them, so let's see what I say.
Yeah, these are not scripted. So if you had to summarize everything we discuss into a marketing mindset, what mindset should marketers and business owners have to implement the core elements of building a community or working with influencers in their business?
I would summarize it by saying, oh, this is a good question. How do I summarize it? I said a lot of things. I think I probably sum it up by saying have a growth mindset when building your community, and set a foundation that is going to set you up for success in the timeline that you're given.
I love it. And for anyone listening that's in the stage of figuring out what they'd like to do in the marketing industry, what role or roles would you say will have the highest demand or opportunity in the next 3 to 5 years?
I don't know what roles, and marketing is really interesting. I would say anybody that is looking to get into marketing at this point is try anything and everything. Because you can go where the demand is, but also if you don't love what it is that you're doing, it's going to show. And that's the interesting part, I think, about being a marketer, is when your passion shines through, you're going to be successful. And if that's product marketing, that's product marketing. If that's brand marketing, that's brand marketing. If that's influencers, that's influencers. I don't think that influencer marketing is going to die down. So I do think that's an area that's really going to grow. And if we could probably get some regulation in the space, that's for another podcast that we can talk about that. But once there's a little bit more regulation in the space, it's going to be a pivotal role in the marketing orgs. I don't know that it has like the amount of respect that it deserves at this point, but I will say I think that's an area that's kind of just growing, and it's an area that you can really easily step into. But my biggest advice is like, try it all to figure out where your passion is, and your passion will shine through in your success.
I would agree with that. Follow your passion for sure. Similar to what I did going into freelancing. And then last question, tell us, where can listeners connect with you or learn more about what you do?
Listeners can connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me Katya Allison. I am also launching my own podcast called Let's Talk Marketing. I also do consulting, but you can find all of that information on my LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. This was so much fun.
Thank you. I'll be looking out for the new business, Sunshine Shades.